Hello, everyone. I am Simmone Park, and I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. And despite what you may think, this is not a talk about basketball or the Toronto Raptors, although touching down in LA, do kind of want a Kauai River. Yeah. Today, I am here to crush the myth on North Korea. Because when people think North Korea, they usually think about this. But the leader of a country does not necessarily represent the people. Because let's be honest, if that were the case, yeah. This is my father. He was born in North Korea, and when we were growing up, he did not hide the guilt about getting out while so many people were still trapped and suffering. Now, my father's dream is to build a ramen factory so that not one more North Korean has to die of starvation. Now, sometimes my father took it a little too far. For example, when Kim Jong-un was still just the teenage offspring of the North Korean leader and studying in Switzerland, my father devised a plan to send me to the same school in Switzerland. I assume so that I could win Kim Jong-un's heart, marry him, wait until he became the leader of North Korea, and then infiltrate from the inside. Yeah. Yep. But that didn't happen, thankfully. I was like, the one time in my life that I was like, thank God we're too poor. Now, it didn't matter if I had become a doctor or a lawyer. Nothing short of reunifying the Koreas would have made my parents happy and proud. And you think you had hardcore Asian tiger parents? Yeah. Now, it took me over 30 years before I would let go of working a job that I hated, but it made a lot of money and it gave my parents street cred, stuff that they could brag about to their parents. It took me over 30 years before I would finally just trust myself and do what made me happy and brought me joy. So today, I actually get to travel around the world and tell stories and perform stand-up comedy. And sometimes I'll actually do workshops for large corporations because you can't buy food or pay rent with laughter. Yeah. Now, a few months ago, I was actually in New York City and I attended an event where North Korean defectors shared their story. And I could not keep it together. I'm talking the big, ugly cry. I was just like, how is this happening? And nobody cares. And I realized that nobody cares because nobody knows. You see, what they show in the news is just Kim Jong-un and nuclear weapons. They don't show anything about the people. And at the Q&A, somebody asked the North Korean defectors, what is your hope for North Korean people? And their answer was that one day, North Korean people would be able to travel the world freely and speak their mind without fear of persecution. And that really hit me. Because I get to travel the world and literally say whatever I want. My lifestyle is the dream of 25 million people who are willing to die for their freedom. And I wondered, if my dad didn't get out when he did, the stories of these North Korean defectors could be my story. And that really shook me to my core. And I realized that I could do something to try and let people know what was actually going on. So I actually reached out to one of the women who shared their stories that day in New York City. And she actually allowed me, she gave me permission to share that story with you today. So this is Joy. I was born and raised in a small North Korean village near the border with China. My family was very poor, and as a child, I could not attend school. Life was extremely difficult, and we were just trying to survive. When I was 7, my mother quietly left us to go to China in order to make money. It took me months to realize that she was never coming back. As a teenager, my stepmother kept trying to marry me off so they would have one less mouth to feed. I didn't want to be married off, so I finally decided to use a broker to help me escape to China to find a better life. When I left behind my nicest clothes, hoping my father could sell them to buy food. I felt so sorry for not being a good daughter. I sewed a secret pocket into my jacket and hid a photo of my family there. And under my collar, I hid enough opium to kill myself in case I was caught. I stood in the knee-deep snow, waiting for the chance to make my escape. I could hear the ice cracking as I crawled on my stomach across the frozen river. I knew at any minute a North Korean guard could see me escaping and shoot me. I finally made it to the Chinese side. My toes were frozen white. I found the broker, who took me to her home to rest and recover. And I soon realized I was trapped. She told me I had to repay her and the other brokers a lot of money for helping me escape. I had no choice but to be sold as a bride. For 3 days, a broker paraded me around villages in northern China, and crowds of men would gather to bid on me. I stared at the floor to avoid looking into their eyes. I did not understand what they were saying, but I could tell they were talking about me. I felt so humiliated, treated like an animal in a zoo. The North Korean broker finally found a man who was willing to pay enough for me. I was sold for $3,000. I felt like I was losing everything, including my own body, to a man I had just met. I was only 18. The man who bought me lived with his parents. They were afraid I would run away, so I was not even allowed to go to the bathroom without their permission. One morning, I started feeling sick, so they took me to a local hospital. I was pregnant. As everyone celebrated, I felt even more hopeless. This pregnancy would make my escape impossible. I had heard that if you jump off a high place or carry heavy things while you're pregnant, you'll have a miscarriage. So I jumped off the highest tree in the backyard and carried heavy buckets of water. But 9 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. For the first few days after her birth, I didn't even want to look at her. I couldn't help resenting her. But as the days passed, her smile and joyful laughter began to melt away my troubles and hardships. For the next 2 years, my daughter became my only reason to live. One day, I was introduced to a South Korean man who offered to help me get to safety. But he warned me that the journey through China and Southeast Asia would be too dangerous for a young child. I was so torn. This was my chance to finally be free from the man who bought me and from the constant fear of being caught and sent back to North Korea to face imprisonment and torture. But how could I leave my child, the only joy in my life? I was afraid I would never get an opportunity like this again, so I made the extremely difficult decision to go to South Korea. I cried every day for the next 3 months thinking about my daughter. During my journey out of China, there were many nights when I woke up thinking I'd heard my daughter's voice calling out mommy. One night, I didn't want to wake everyone up, so I went behind the curtain to cry, and I found another woman who was already there crying. She had also left her child behind to escape with my group. We sat behind that curtain in the safe house, weeping and hugging each other. I thought of the day my own mother left me, how I resented her. Now I had done the same thing to my own daughter. Now Joy ended her story by saying that she should not be standing here today and that she was one of the lucky ones. And despite everything that she's gone through, she's right. Now, with the help of an organization called Liberty in North Korea, headquartered right here in Los Angeles, Joy made it to safety in South Korea in 2013. But there are still 25 million North Koreans who are willing to die for freedom. Now I ask myself, if my father had not been born in North Korea, Would I care about North Koreans as much as I do? Now, I want to believe that the answer would be yes, but I'm not sure. And so I ask you guys, knowing what you know now, do you care? And I know I said at the beginning of this talk that this was not going to be about basketball, but here's the thing. If nobody cares to figure out about North Korea beyond the myths that they show us in the news, then our last great hope for North Korea is Dennis Rodman. And that is definitely something that makes me want to Kauai a river. I'm Simmone Park. Thank you guys so much.